Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books and Bytes. Today, we're diving deep into Alexis de Tocqueville's Democracy in America. This book is considered, well, one of the most insightful analyses of American democracy ever written, even though, it was published almost 200 years ago.
It's true. Tocqueville's work, it still resonates today because I think he managed to capture something essential about the spirit of American democracy,
Yeah.
its strengths and its potential pitfalls.
So for our listeners who haven't had the chance to tackle this, well, it's a massive book. It's two parts. No judgment here, of course, but can you give us a quick rundown of what it's all about?
Absolutely. In a nutshell, Tocqueville traveled through America in the 1830s, and he was just amazed by the spirit of equality he found here. He contrasted it with the aristocratic societies of Europe and really explored how this fundamental value of equality shaped everything, from, American law and politics to its social customs and even the ambitions of its people. But he also cautioned that this experiment in democracy, wasn't without its risks.
Okay, let's unpack this. What were some of these risks that worried him?
Well, one of his most famous arguments is this idea of the tyranny of the majority, where the pressure to conform to the will of the majority could stifle individual liberty and dissent.
That's a bit unsettling to think about, isn't it?
It is, and he had other concerns too, like the potential for, materialism to overshadow like higher pursuits, this delicate balance between individual freedom and the need for social cohesion, and just the challenges of maintaining a vibrant democracy in a rapidly changing world.
Wow. So he was really looking ahead. So he wasn't just writing a travelogue about his adventures in America. He was trying to understand the very, DNA of this new kind of nation and predict where it might be headed.
Exactly. And he does it all with incredible insight and a knack for observation that makes you feel like you're right there with him. Riding in a stagecoach through the American wilderness.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Let's jump into Tocqueville's journey and explore his observations in more detail. Where do we even begin with a book as rich and complex as Democracy in America?
You're right. It's a lot to unpack. Well, why don't we begin where Tocqueville himself began, with his arrival in America and those first impressions that really set the stage for his entire analysis.
I like it. Take us back to 1831.
Mm-hmm.
Tocqueville, this young French aristocrat, steps off the boat and onto American soil. What's going through his mind? What kind of society does he encounter?
You have to remember, Tocqueville was coming from a world that was, steeped in aristocratic traditions where social hierarchies were just deeply ingrained.
Right.
So he was immediately struck by the relative equality he encountered in America, particularly in those New England townships where he began his travels.
Okay, so a far cry from the rigid class systems he was used to back in France. But what did this American equality actually look like in practice? Give me an example.
Well, he was fascinated by the lack of inherited social ranks and titles. Unlike in Europe, where your family name and lineage could largely determine your destiny, Tocqueville observed that in America there wasn't this insurmountable gulf between social classes.
So you're saying that in America, your last name didn't automatically determine your place in society.
Right.
What you did and who you were mattered more than where you came from.
That's how Tocqueville saw it. He observed that while, differences in wealth and education, they certainly existed, the overall social fabric felt more fluid, less determined by birth. And this profound difference in social structure would become a recurring theme throughout his book. It really shaped his analysis of everything from, American lawmaking to family dynamics.
Okay, that makes sense. So if Tocqueville was so impressed by this American spirit of equality, where do we start to see some of those concerns and anxieties he had about democracy's, potential downsides?
That's a great question. And it leads us to, one of the most crucial parts of his book. You see, Tocqueville recognized that while equality was a powerful force for good, it could also paradoxically give rise to some unforeseen consequences.
Unforeseen consequences. Now you've got me really curious. What did you mean by that?
Well, one of the things that worried Tocqueville most was this concept he called the tyranny of the majority, which we touched upon earlier. He argued that in a society where everyone is considered equal, there's a risk that the majority's opinion could become all-powerful,
Right.
potentially silencing dissenting voices and stifling individual liberty.
That's a concern we still grapple with today, right? I mean, think about the pressure to conform on social media, where unpopular opinions can just get drowned out so quickly. It's like Like Tocqueville saw this coming from a mile away.
Absolutely. And he didn't just talk about this in abstract terms. He pointed to specific examples like how public opinion in some southern states was so strongly against abolition that even those who, maybe harbored private doubts about slavery were afraid to speak out for fear of social ostracism.
It's almost like this pressure to conform, this fear of going against the grain. It creates a kind of invisible barrier to open dialogue and critical thinking.
That's a great way to put it. And Tocqueville argued that this tyranny of the majority, it wasn't just confined to the political sphere. It could seep into every aspect of American life, shaping social norms, influencing personal choices, and even dictating matters of taste.
So it's not just about who you vote for. It's about what you wear, what you believe, and how willing you are to express those beliefs publicly, even if they're not the most popular ones.
Precisely. And, one of the things that makes Democracy in America such a compelling read even today is that Tocqueville doesn't just point out these potential problems, right?
Yeah.
He also offers potential solutions,
Okay.
ways to safeguard against the excesses of democracy while preserving its core values.
Okay, now I'm on the edge of my seat. What did he propose as an antidote to this tyranny of the majority?
Well, Tocqueville was a big proponent of strong institutions that could act as checks and balances on the power of the majority. He was a huge fan of America's system of separated powers, where the executive, legislative, and judicial branches could kind of keep each other in check.
Right.
He believed that this kind of institutional framework was essential to prevent any one group or faction from gaining too much power and potentially running roughshod over individual liberties.
It's that old adage about power corrupting.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. Tocqueville understood that even in a democracy, power needed to be distributed and regulated to safeguard individual freedom. And he didn't just stop at government institutions. He also saw a crucial role for civil society, those voluntary associations, religious groups, and independent newspapers that could foster debate, promote civic engagement, and give voice to diverse perspectives.
So it's about having a vibrant public square, a space where different ideas can clash, and where the majority isn't the only voice that gets heard. I'm starting to see why this book is still so relevant. Tocqueville was identifying challenges that are as old as democracy itself, these fundamental tensions that we're still trying to navigate today.
You've hit the nail on the head, and we're just scratching the surface of Tocqueville's insights. There's so much more to explore in his observations about, American religion, the American approach to ambition, and even the surprising influence of lawyers in shaping the nation.
Well, you've definitely piqued my curiosity, listeners. You won't want to miss the next installment of Books and Bytes, where we'll dive deeper into those fascinating themes with our resident Tocqueville expert.
As we kind of delve further into Tocqueville's Democracy in America, it's striking how he connects the dots between seemingly disparate aspects of American life. He makes you realize that it's not just about individual policies or laws. It's this intricate web of values and beliefs and social structures that make American democracy what it is.
Yeah, it's like he's saying you can't understand one piece of the puzzle without looking at the whole picture. So we've talked about equality and the potential for the tyranny of the majority, but what other threads did Tocqueville kind of pull on as he tried to unravel this grand American experiment?
Well, one aspect he found particularly fascinating was the role of religion in American society.
Okay.
Now this might seem a bit counterintuitive at first. After all, America was founded on this principle of separating church and state.
Right.
But Tocqueville was struck by how deeply religious Americans were, especially compared to Europeans at the time.
That's interesting because you might assume that a society built on individual liberty and freedom of thought wouldn't be particularly religious. But Tocqueville seemed to find the opposite to be true in America. Why was that?
That's the question that intrigued him. Tocqueville argued that the very separation of church and state,
Okay.
which some might, see as weakening religion, actually strengthened it in America.
Oh, sure.
He observed that when when religion isn't, intertwined with political power, when it's a matter of personal choice rather than, state mandate, it becomes a more vital and authentic force in people's lives.
It, it's like that old saying, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. Maybe when religion is imposed from above, it loses some of its personal significance.
That's a great way to put it. Tocqueville noticed that in America, religion, it wasn't just about, dogma or rituals. It was deeply woven into the fabric of daily life, shaping, morals, influencing social norms, and even fostering a sense of civic duty.
Right.
He argued that this strong religious underpinning played a crucial role in supporting American democracy.
Okay. I'm starting to see how he's connecting those dots again.
Yeah.
He's saying that religion in this uniquely American context actually contributed to a stronger sense of community and shared values, which are essential for a healthy democracy.
You got it. And it's not that, Tocqueville believed everyone needed to be religious. He was more interested in how religious values, particularly those, emphasizing personal responsibility, community involvement, moral conduct, how those values helped to create a more virtuous and engaged citizenry.
Okay.
He saw it as a kind of, social glue that helped bind Americans together, even as they celebrated their individual liberties.
It sounds like he viewed religion as a kind of, invisible scaffolding, supporting the grand structure of American democracy from within.
That's a great analogy, and this observation about the importance of shared values and social cohesion, it leads us to another key theme in Tocqueville's work, the American approach to ambition.
Now, this is something I've always found fascinating about America.
Yeah.
That whole land of opportunity idea, where anyone can achieve success if they just work hard enough. How did Tocqueville see this aspect of the American character?
Well, he was certainly struck by the energy and ambition he encountered in America.
Right.
But he argued that the nature of American ambition was different from what he'd observed in aristocratic societies. In Europe, ambition was often channeled toward, gaining social status, inheriting titles, amassing power within a relatively rigid social hierarchy.
Because in those older systems, your destiny was often predetermined by your birthright. Right? You were kind of stuck in your lane, so to speak.
Exactly, but in America, with its emphasis on equality and social mobility, ambition, it took on a different flavor. Tocqueville observed that Americans were driven by a desire for material well-being, for financial success, for climbing the social ladder in a system where those rungs were at least in theory accessible to anyone.
So it wasn't about inheriting your father's castle. It was about building your own house, even if it was a log cabin on the frontier.
Precisely, and Tocqueville saw this entrepreneurial spirit as both a strength and a potential pitfall.
A pitfall. How so? I'm getting that butt feeling again. Like when your doctor tells you you're in great shape, but then launches into a lecture about the dangers of too much salt.
You're not wrong to be wary. While Tocqueville admired the dynamism and drive he saw in America, he worried that this relentless pursuit of material wealth, it could come at a cost.
Yep.
He called it the pursuit of well-being, and he argued that it could lead to a kind of restless materialism where people were so focused on getting ahead that they lost sight of higher ideals, civic virtue, the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake.
So he's saying that if we're not careful, that very drive that makes America so dynamic could also lead to a society obsessed with keeping up with the Joneses rather than pondering the bigger questions of life and contributing to the common good.
Exactly. Tocqueville worried that a society overly fixated on material gain might become too focused on individual success and lose sight of the importance of community shared purpose and the common good. All those things he saw as essential for a healthy democracy.
This is giving me a lot to chew on.
Yes.
It's like he's saying that America's greatest strength, its incredible energy and drive, could also become its Achilles heel if it's not balanced by a sense of shared purpose and a commitment to something larger than ourselves.
You've got it. And as we talk about this tension between individualism and the common good, it's important to remember that Tocqueville wasn't just a detached observer, right?
Yeah.
He was deeply invested in understanding these challenges because he believed that America's experiment in democracy held valuable lessons for the rest of the world.
He wasn't just writing for an academic audience. He was trying to start a conversation to spark a debate about the kind of society we want to create.
Exactly. He wanted his readers to really think critically about the trade-offs inherent in democratic systems and to consider how we can shape those systems to be more just, more equitable, and more sustainable in the long run.
And I think that's what makes democracy in America such an enduring work. It's not just a dusty old book about 19th century America. It's a mirror reflecting back our own hopes, our own anxieties, and our own responsibility to shape the future of democracy in an ever-changing world.
Absolutely. And those questions lead us to another crucial aspect of Tocqueville's analysis. The tension he observed between, the benefits of centralized power and the potential risks of government overreach.
Yeah.
He was fascinated by how America grappled with this challenge, especially in its early years.
Okay, this is something I'm eager to hear more about.
Yeah.
Tocqueville's observations on the balance of power between the federal government and individual states, it feels more relevant than ever.
It really does.
So we left off talking about the balance of power, federal government, individual states. It's something Tocqueville he really honed in on.
It's true. He saw this real push and pull, this new nation trying to find its footing and the appeal, right, of a strong central authority. I mean, especially for a young country, kind of trying to establish itself, you need that unity, that clear leadership. Tocqueville, he understood that, but
There's always a but.
he also knew, coming from Europe, seeing how power, it can be abused, well, he knew it could swing too far. This wasn't just theoretical for him.
So he saw both sides. Did he come down on one side or the other? I mean, what did he think America should do? Centralize more, give more power to the states?
He was way too sharp to, pick a team. Tocqueville, he was more about looking at the machinery of it all. How do you get the benefits without it going off the rails, right? And one thing that really struck him about America, it was those local governments.
You mean like those townships he was so into?
Exactly. Those townships, they really got to him. This idea that people, they could have a say in their own backyard. It was like an antidote to what did he call it? The tyranny of the majority, right? That and a big faraway government. Well, it creates this distance, and that can breed, apathy, indifference.
So if you're involved locally, you're more, I don't know, more invested in making the whole thing work.
You've got it. It's that sense of ownership, right? That your voice, it actually makes a difference. And that was huge for Tocqueville because that's how you fight that drift towards individualism he worried about. That if people just care about themselves, well, society kind of, it breaks down, doesn't it? You need those bonds, that shared purpose.
It's like he's creating this recipe for a healthy democracy.
Yeah.
And it's not just about rights, it's about responsibilities too.
100%. And that's what makes his thinking so, I don't know, so relevant, even all these years later, right? We're still trying to figure out this whole democracy thing. And he was asking these really tough questions way back then. And one more group he really zeroed in on, it might surprise you.
Oh, okay, hit me.
Lawyers.
Lawyers. Really, I got to say, they don't exactly have the best reputation when it comes to, idealism and democracy and all that. So what did he see in lawyers?
Well, he was fascinated by them. Back then, remember, America's still figuring out its legal system. It's new. And here come these lawyers. They're the ones, they're interpreting the Constitution, arguing cases. They're literally shaping the rules of the game.
So they had a lot of power.
They did. But here's the thing. Tocqueville, he saw them as this kind of moderating force.
Lawyers?
Yeah.
Moderating. Now I've heard it all.
Think about it. They're trained to think logically, value precedent, to look for compromise.
Yeah.
They're all about the process, the rules, the long game. And in a democracy, that's essential, right? You need that counterbalance to the passions, the sometimes short-sightedness of the majority even.
It's like he's saying that even in a system where everyone's supposed to be equal, you still need people who, I don't know, who understand the system, the rules, how it all fits together.
And who are going to uphold it, not just use it for their own, purposes.
Wow. Tocqueville, I'm telling you, this guy, he really knew how to observe. It's like he looked at America, not just for what it was, but for what it could be.
And what it needed to watch out for. And those are questions that they don't really expire, do they?
Definitely food for thought. Listeners, if democracy in America isn't already on your list, well, maybe bump it up a few spots. It's a long read, but trust us, it's worth it. And on that note, we'll wrap up another Books and Bites. We'll be back next week with a whole new deep dive. Until then,